Hello, YouTube. Um, so I've been thinking a lot about what what precisely I do, right, when I make YouTube videos. Um, and and I think I've realized that one of the things that I like about making a YouTube video, as opposed to writing something, right? That there's a distinction here. Um, I, if you read Foucault or listen to his lectures, he talks about what he calls technologies of the self, right? Modes through which a human being can develop themselves in a certain way and shape and sort of form themselves as an autonomous agent rather than to be formed outside via institutions and norms and what he calls regimes of ontology. Um, and so writing is this kind of practice that produces oneself. But I don't, I'm not ever sure what it is. But for some reason, I've never enjoyed the practice of writing. Um, uh, and I could go into to why. Um, but it's something that uh, feels it doesn't do it for it feels exhausting to me, right? It depletes me in a certain way. Um, so, uh, but at the same time, I think that there's something interesting about that practice, right? Um, and further, I was thinking, or I was reading recently, Beyond Good and Evil, and Nietzsche talks about the philosophers of the future, and he calls them attempters, right? And so this idea really intrigued me, right? This notion of uh, experimentation, right? And this notion of improvisation, improvisational thought, right? Something that I wouldn't even call philosophy as such. Um, this is something that I think is a really interesting idea, and so these thoughts together, together with some other things, have led me to desire to want to bracket off sort of a space on my channel uh, to simply improvise. Um, and in a certain way, I really like the idea of just sort of having a regular, maybe not too regular, but something like a series of videos, um, wherein there is nothing, there is no view, right, that I'm trying to express, but rather just kind of taking perhaps a quotation or a thought or an image, perhaps, or something like this, and just kind of laterally playing with the ideas, and um, and this is something that I'm doing now in a certain way, right? Uh, this character of improvisation as something that there's something really interesting about the medium of video. There's something really interesting about um, uh, being able to hit record and to just go, right. And this is something that I may not be terribly good at. I think that my videos tend to be quite rambly as they are. I tend to get sidetracked and my brain goes 12 different places at once. And I think that that's something. I think that's something that I'd like to allow to just happen, sort of. And perhaps everything that might be said in this sort of class or category of videos might be totally useless. Maybe there might be things that might be useful to someone. Um, but there's and it is. I think that the development of this line of thinking, the development of this way of thinking, the development of uh, this attempt at a notion of thought as practice, right, is something that's in a certain way purely self-indulgent, right? Purely a practice of autonomy, right? But I think that there's also something very interesting in knowing that if I hit play, if I hit upload on this video, it will be on display for other people to watch, and I think that that sort of shapes things in an interesting way. I don't know how it will shape things, but I think it's an interesting thing to introduce into the mix, rather than say doing something for oneself, right? Um, there's a strange any of my subscribers who actually make videos probably realize that there's a strange undecidability in the act of making a YouTube video, particularly people who hit play and start talking, right? I think it's different when people start cutting up their videos and trying to present something, trying to present an argument, a clearly formed case, right? And a cleverly formed case very often. I think that that's one style of making a video. That's very different than hitting play and starting to talk. And anybody who does that, someone like Conference Report does this sort of thing, Yusuf does this kind of thing, Dmitry Ivan Alyosha does this kind of thing. Just hit play and start talking, though you might have something in mind or something to say, some teleology behind the activity that goes on the video. There's a strange feature where I, right now, right, am looking at the eye of the camera on my laptop, right, and I see an image of myself that's reflecting me speaking right now, right? So there's something tremendously narcissistic about the activity of making a YouTube video in the first place, kind of. And then the notion that this sort of narcissistic activity, even when trying to address someone, right, even when trying to address some particular argument, there's something interesting about the fact that it occurs in this kind of within the boundaries of this kind of narcissism. Or there's an undecidability between narcissism and for the other, right? Which is interesting. So I think that medium, or this format, right, produces an interesting and sort of unique situation for kind of improvisational thought. And I am a musician, right? I went to school for music, and I was always a terrible improviser. Always have been a terrible improviser. But I like the idea of improvising in thought, right? And again, I might have said this, but this video is a kind of, perhaps there's an introductory element to a bracketed series of videos wherein the goal is to just explore ideas and to play without expressing a view. or to play with ideas without any kind of direction, but from a jumping off point. This is what's happening in this video at the moment, right? And I think that this is something that I'd like to get better at, right? To simply improvise and to simply take ideas and to play with ideas, um, on sort of on my own, right? Without going to some source, which is something that I perhaps do too much in a way. Um, uh, so yeah, this is so there's going to be, maybe, if I ever decide to do such a thing, um, there's the possibility that there might be a whole bunch of rambling and sort of hopefully playful and hopefully interesting videos coming, um, of just kind of improvisatory thought, which is an art form, let's say, that I think is kind of lost, and I think that there isn't enough on YouTube. I think that we've all been kind of suckered into this notion of I have a thesis and then bullet pointed bits of evidence to back up such a thesis, and I make a case, right? And that there's nothing necessarily wrong with doing that, of course, but I think that that way of organizing thought, um, rather than simply letting thought play, is something that has eclipsed sort of the free activity of of agency dancing with itself. Um, so so yeah, I guess that's the first in some sort of loosely defined series that I'd like to do. And yeah, have a good day.